All right, guys, it's Brian here again, and today is day 5 in our 12 days of shaving series. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about razor blades. Up to this point, we've talked about razors, we've talked about soaps, we've talked about and shaving creams, we've talked about aftershaves, and we've talked about brushes. And so today is going to be kind of the last day that we talk about the components or the tools of, so to speak, of wet shaving before we dive into talking some about technique. So, razor blades is a space where there are just so many options. In my opinion, probably more options than even soap, or it seems that way. There are just lots and lots of blades out there. And so the question for somebody getting into the hobby is, what do I start with? Where do I start? And what blades are good blades? And that's a great question. A lot of us got into this hobby because at least I know I did, and I know there are a lot of guys that say we got into this hobby to save money. And the area where we saw where we could save money was in blades, because the multi-bladed cartridge that Gillette is selling now, you're talking $20 for a 4-pack. I can buy a 10-pack of some blades for $1 or $2, depending on the blade. So we got into this hobby to save money, and this is the area where we thought we would save it. Now, obviously, you can see I've acquired quite a bit of software and hardware and hardware and software over there in this hobby. So how much I've saved, I don't know, but I'm having great shaves. I'm having a lot of fun, so that's what matters. But blades is really where we, I know for a lot of guys, that's where we thought we would see the savings. And you still do. One of the things that cracks me up is, you can get some blades that are, average out to be 8 cents a piece, and then other blades average out to be 25 cents a piece. And guys are like, oh, those 25-cent blades are so expensive. And I'm, yeah, okay, well, comparatively speaking, yes, they are, but compared to the Gillettes, not even in the same ballpark. But how do you know what blade to start with? And that's a great question, and that's one of the things that I want to talk about today. When you're starting into wet shaving, when I did, I bought a DE89, and it came with a pack of derby blades. And so for the first 3 months, all I used were derby blades, and I had great shaves. Nothing wrong with the derby blades. But as I started looking around, because I was getting ready to, the derby blades were about ready to run out. Okay, what are my other options? I was overwhelmed by the number of options. And so I jump into the forums and I jump into the Facebook groups and I start reading as much as I can about blades. And, I start hearing people talk about, well, this blade is crap and that blade is crap and, this blade doesn't work and that blade is garbage, but, this blade is awesome. And, certain blades end up with this rep that, if you're really a die-hard, hardcore wet shaver, you're going to use this particular blade. And one of those, and probably the blade that has that biggest rep, are feathers. And I'll talk about them in a little bit. People kind of have this idea that when you get into the hobby, if you start with a derby blade, well, you're just starting, with kind of like training wheels, or you're in preschool, and wet shaving preschool, and you're going to work your way up, and then eventually you are going to graduate to the feather. Hogwash, horse manure, whatever you want to say, that's crap. What you need to understand is, just like anything else in wet shaving, this is a your mileage may vary segment. What works for me may not work for you, and what works for you may not work for me. And don't let anybody try to pressure you into using something because they say, well, if you're really a hardcore wet shaver, you've got to use X, Y, or Z. And I don't care. That's across any segment of the hobby, whether it's razors, whether it's brushes, whether it's soaps and creams or aftershaves. Do what works for you. That's what this hobby is all about, is finding enjoyment in the hobby. This isn't a competitive sport. The person with the newest gear or the sharpest blades or the whatever, they don't win. Who wins is the person who's enjoying their shaves. And if you're doing something that doesn't bring enjoyment to you, what's the point? I don't care how awesome somebody says feather blades are. If they tear up your face, don't use them. And if derby blades work great for you, use them. Blades are something again that they just are going to function differently for different people, and that's okay. So when you get into this, how do you figure out what blade is going to work for me? What I recommend you do is don't go out and buy a 100 pack of a particular type of blade just because of what somebody else has said works for them. Go to Maggard Razors, go to Razor Blades and More, go to Italian Barber. They all have sampler packs. Buy a sampler pack of blades. And once you get that sampler pack, don't just go crazy and use a different blade every shave. But what I recommend you do is work through each pack and get a feel for that particular blade. I would recommend keeping a little bit of a journal, making some notes. Okay, how did this blade work for me? How did this blade, and just so you understand, so you kind of remember, because it's going to take a while for you to work through the different blades till you get a feel for how a blade works for you. So definitely don't jump from blade to blade every shave, but get a feel for a blade before you move on to the next one. And that may not necessarily mean that you work all the way through a 10-pack or a 5-pack or whatever. It may just mean that this week I use Derby blades, and next week I'm going to use Sharks, and the week after that I'm going to use Wilkinsons and whatever. But just come up with a way where you get a feel for the blade before you move on to the next. The second thing with regards to that is if you get a blade and it just doesn't feel right in your razor, don't just discount it and throw the whole pack out and say, well, this sucks. Because every once in a while you're going to get a bad blade. And I don't care. It's across the spectrum. Every once in a while there's a bad feather that comes out. It's no big deal. Take that one, bin it, load it with another one, and see, okay, how does this one feel? So give each blade a fair shot before you move on to the next one. The other thing that I have found is that I have certain blades that work well in one razor and they don't necessarily work as well in another razor. So keep that in mind. Your razor and blade combination is going to affect the quality of your shave, and it's going to affect the performance of certain blades. And so just keep that in mind as well. But don't feel pressured that you have to buy a particular brand of razor blade just to fit in and be with the cool people. That's crazy. That's not what this is about. This is about finding what works for you. Particularly, right now, I'm a big, huge fan of Vashkods. I like Gillette Silver Blues. They've worked very well for me. But I had heard people talk, about Sharks and that they didn't like Sharks and Sharks was a bad blade. I just had the opportunity to try a Shark a couple of days ago. It worked great for me. Another blade that doesn't really get a whole lot of play are Big Bends. They work great for me. So, don't get caught up with, oh, so-and-so said this blade is crap, or so-and-so says that blade is crap. Try it for yourself and see if it works for your face. You're going to be the best judge when it comes to blades. Now, in blades, there's a couple of different things, a couple of different ways that blades are manufactured. You have what are the carbon steel blades. You have Teflon coated blades. You have stainless blades. So each one of those are going to function a little bit differently, and there's going to be a little bit of different feel. And you want to keep in mind, especially with carbon steel blades, that you make sure that when you're done, you dry them off. If you don't, they will rust. And you don't want that happening in your razor. One of the things that I have taken to doing is I keep a fine tip marker in my den, and I actually will keep track on each blade. You can see right there I've done the hash marks. On the ones that have the numbers on the corners, I'll circle the numbers. I keep track of the number of shaves that I have on a blade. And then that way, what I know is that when it gets to a certain spot, I've just come to understand that for me, about 4 shaves on a blade is about what I get. And if I try to push it much beyond that, usually I end up with a bad shave. The blades are so cheap, I just generally bin them after my 4th shave. You don't have to do that, and some blades you may find work well for 3, and some may work well for more. This Vashkod, I just actually did a 5th shave with it, and it actually worked very well. Towards the end, I was starting to feel a little bit of a tug, and so I'm going to get rid of it today. But that's how I keep track of them. Now, another question that guys have is, well, do I leave them in the razor or do I don't? And that is going to be totally up to you. There's multiple schools of thought about that. But what I do with mine is I rinse my razor off, I rinse the blade off, I pat it dry, both the razor and the blade. I put the blade back in my razor, and I close it up and I store it that way. Again, especially if you're using carbon steel blades, you've got to make sure you get them dry though. You don't want them to rust. Some guys, they take them out and they put them on the wrapper. And they keep track on the wrapper as far as the number of shaves. Personally, I don't want a bunch of blades, unwrapped blades floating around, so that's why I've chosen not to do that. But again, whatever works for you, just don't feel like there's one system that's better than another. In my opinion, I can go either way. I just have chosen not to leave unwrapped blades around just for safety reasons. The final thing today is, okay, how do I dispose of the blades? When I'm done with them, how do I get rid of them? And there are a number of ways to do it. Some guys have, they've purchased blade banks, antique blade banks, and you can just drop them in there, and then after a while they'll fill up and you can just empty them out. Other guys have just taken a coffee can and wrap duct tape around the top of it or electrical tape, cut a slit in it, and I mean, that'll keep you going for a long time. So there's all kinds of ways that you can dispose of it. I've seen guys take Altoid tins and put the razor blades in there and then just get rid of them that way. Now, what I do, and I dropped my blade, so I'm going to pick it up here. Maybe. All right, carefully pick this up without cutting myself. What I've taken to doing is, because I don't want to have anything cluttering up my den. And the way that my vanity is built here, it's exposed, so I don't want anything just sitting underneath there. So I just take to doing this. I carefully take it and I snap it. And then I'm going to take it and I just wrap it up in a little bit of toilet paper like this so that it's safe. And then I dispose of it that way. To me, it's a matter of making sure that you dispose of them safely. And, if you've got you want to put them in a tin, do that. If you want to, but I definitely wouldn't take a blade and just toss it in the trash that way. Make sure you do try to dispose of them in a safe manner. And, I'm the one that takes out the trash. So if I see this, I know what I'm looking at, and, I know to be careful with it, but that's just how I've taken to disposing of them, so I don't have a bunch of blades sitting around. So anyhow, that's my talk with regards to blades. Again, the biggest thing I want to emphasize with regards to blades is that it's a personal choice. What you use needs to be based on what works for your face, what's comfortable for you, and what works in your razors. And do not let anybody pressure you into thinking that somehow you're not getting a good shave because you're not using feather blades. That's hogwash. Pure, unadulterated hogwash. Use what works for you, and you will be happy and you will enjoy your shave. Have a great day, everybody.